Greetings exiles and welcome to another build guide. For today we have Lightning Strike, featuring one of my most favorite items in the entire game, which is Hand of Wisdom and Action. This unique weapon adds lightning damage to attacks per 10 intelligence. I guess you can see where we are going with this build. Originally this weapon used to be used with Molten Strike Juggernaut builds, but since Molten Strike was absolutely shredded in the previous updates, people started to forget about it. The main issue was damage, thus I decided to recreate this build, but this time using a crit ascendancy. Thus I decided to go with a generic assassin build. The idea is to stack as much intelligence as before, but with 400% or more crit multiplier instead of taking elemental overload. We ended up with even more intelligence than before, which meant more energy shield, and 3 times more damage because this time we have critical strike multiplier instead of taking elemental overload. I went with Lightning Strike this time just to match the damage type added by our weapon. From here I went ahead and designed the longest passive tree I could. It focuses on scaling our intelligence and crit damage. Having our passive tree looking like a long straight line scales the split personality jewel effect. We will talk about this one later though. You might notice that we are not fully committing into intelligence stacking, and instead taking some useful damage nodes on the sides of our passive tree. Now before going into items and gems as usual, I should clarify that this build is not designed specifically for single target damage. Lightning Strike is arguably one of the worst skills in the game for bossing. However, we managed to achieve an acceptable levels of single target damage while having the best possible clearing speed and tankiness. But with that being said, let's start talking about your items. Starting off with the one item that allows this entire build to happen, Hand of Wisdom and Action. As mentioned before, this unique claw adds a flat lightning damage to attacks with intelligence. It also gives us increased attack speed with dexterity, but we are not going to care about that. It is difficult to stack 2 types of attributes in one build, so as a result we are going to focus on intelligence only, and for our missing attack speed we are going to compensate for it using our rare jewels. Finally, this item grants us up to 12% increased attributes for both intelligence and dexterity, which actually makes dual wielding it viable. However, we are not going to dual wield and instead have a shield on our offhand. We are using Adziri's Reflection. Now this is a rather expensive unique item. If you can't afford it, then you can just get any rare shield with decent amount of energy shield, intelligence, and as many resistances as possible. An equivalent or better rare shield is going to cost you around the same, so you might end up getting Adziri's Reflection at the end. Anyway, for our body armor, we have Incandescent Heart. This chest piece grants us 20% of our elemental damage as extra chaos damage, which is a decent damage boost from what is mostly considered a defensive slot. Now the most powerful thing about this item is its interaction with Chaos Inoculation. While you have Chaos Inoculation, you will completely mitigate 25% of all elemental damage you take, because you will take it as chaos damage, and Chaos Inoculation makes you immune to that. So this bonus mitigation becomes noticeable when fighting elemental bosses, especially like the Shaper and Elder. Finally, this chest provides us with a decent amount of energy shield and armor. Our next item is our helm. We have a Hunter influenced rare helm with tier 1 flat intelligence and 10% increased maximum intelligence. Aside from these 2 mods, we need as much energy shield as humanly possible. Bonus points if you can get this combination on a Hubris Circlet, because it has the highest base energy shield. I'd recommend you to manually craft something like this, because the prices can be a little bit too extreme on a finished product. Our next item is a pretty mandatory one and easy to get. Shaper's Touch. These pair of gloves gives us all the accuracy rating we ever need. They are also easy to get with a decent corruption implicit. Mine has 10% increased attack speed, but you can also get elemental weakness curse on hit if you can afford one. Now let's talk about your jewelries, starting with your rings. One of them is supposed to be Lihu Bavol, with decent rolls. This is essential to compensate for whatever attributes or elemental resistances you are missing. The ring also gives you a decent damage roll that can go up to 30%, leaving the lack of defenses as its only downside. However, you can get one with Discipline has increased aura effect corruption implicit to make up for that as well. For your second ring, it's going to be a rare one with as much energy shield and elemental resistances as possible, in addition to crafted elemental damage with attacks prefix. This slot has the highest potential for scaling both your damage and survivability, depending on how much you are willing to spend on it. Anyway, for your amulet, here we have a max tier 1 flat intelligence roll and increased damage per 15 intelligence and tier 1 crit multi. I multi-modded into increased damage while leeching and percentage increased maximum energy shield, then called it a day. Make sure to anoint Divine Fervor since it is the best node for increasing our damage for this build on the entire passive tree. Next we have boots. Here we have some generic energy shield boots with intelligence, resistances, and crafted movement speed. Don't worry about not having the highest possible movement speed roll on your boots, because the Assassin Ascendancy gives you up to 60% more of that by itself. This allows you to save some currency on this slot. Finally, our last item for this build is our belt. Here we have a crystal belt with tier 1 increased attributes, hunter influenced mod, and essence crafted intelligence. The way of how you can get something like this is by spamming Essence of Spite until you get increased attributes alongside the guaranteed intelligence roll. From here you can catalyst it up to 20% and call it a day. And that was it for your items. Now what about gems that goes inside of them? For our main 6 link we have Lightning Strike, elemental damage with attacks, damage on full life. We always count on full life while we have Chaos Inoculation, by the way. Next we have Inspiration, Multi-Strike, and Ancestral Call. Swap Ancestral Call with Elemental Focus while bossing. Our lightning damage isn't high enough to utilize Shock element, and thus using Elemental Focus ends up being best in slot option. Next we have a 4-link aura setup. Here we have Wrath, Discipline, Herald of Thunder, and level 4 Enlighten. Our next setup is a cast when damage taken setup. In it we have level 20 cast when damage taken, Steel Skin, Summon Lightning Golem, and Summon Holy Relic. Our last gem setup contains Shield Charge, Faster Attacks, and Fortify. You will be left with many empty gem sockets which can be utilized for leveling up Awakened gems or whatever other gem setup you prefer. Now that we are done with our gems, let's start talking about our jewels. We are using a single large cluster jewel with the minimum amount of added passives. Our jewel adds some pretty powerful elemental notables like Vengeful Commander, Prismatic Heart, and Disorienting Display. Aside from these notables, we have 2 jewel sockets. In both of them we have 2 split personality jewels with energy shield and intelligence rolls. Those will have 25% increased effect for every node between them and your class starting location. For our specific passive tree, that's a total of 86 bonus to intelligence and energy shield for every split personality. Aside from cluster jewels, we have Emperor's Wit. This unique jewel increases our maximum intelligence and provides us with 30% increased global critical strike chance. It is a very powerful jewel, but also not mandatory. You can feel free to replace this jewel for any rare jewel that has as many crit modifiers as possible. And speaking about rare jewels, as we have said before, we will be getting most of our attack speed from them. Here is a good example of that. Alternatively, you can get crit multi on them as well. Generally speaking, you should focus on your lowest modifiers. If your attack speed is the lowest, then focus on it first and then move on to damage modifiers like crit multiplier. From there you can switch to other mods like elemental resistances and maybe intelligence on the jewel suffix. Keep doing that until you run out of jewel sockets. For bandits, of course we are going to help Alira. The 20% decreased global critical strike multiplier is simply too good to pass out on. For Pantheons, well, I'm going to leave this one for you because they are not essential for this build anyway. And that was it for this build guide. If you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure to leave a like and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss any future build guides like this one. My name is Phoenix and I will see you all in the next video.